Today, I would like to talk about fears and the inner child, but I want to put this in a context of A Course in Miracles. A prominent teacher of this course said something to this effect. We came as love, but we learned fear. Our purpose here on earth is to unlearn fear and move to love. Now, when you consider how I have been speaking about the inner child, you might realize how much inner child wounds contributes to perhaps all the fears that are experienced by humans. To repeat, sometime in childhood, it could be even at the point of incarnation, when the soul that came into the human body experienced human life with such trauma because of the chaos, the confusion, the toxicity, etc., especially if these were qualities in the child's mother's life and also the father, because the child was exposed to all this energy all the time in the womb. And the whole process of childbirth for most of us is not a welcoming process. And it can leave us shocked by the sudden change of being safe in the womb and then suddenly exposed to so much space, noise, light, and so forth. It's traumatic. And because it felt somewhat safe before, the child can feel something horrible has happened and can create fear. So that is the background that I want to talk about. Fears in the inner child that you may not realize is an aspect of it. Did you ever think that overthinking, every detail being analyzed through the thinking mind, is an expression of fear? Well, if you pause and consider, what is the thinking mind doing? It's trying to get an answer. Why? Because there's something troubling. Something has made the adult feel afraid, the teenager feel afraid. And because, as I've spoken before, I hope, thinking is a quality of trauma parts. It's natural that the thinking mind takes over. In addition, it is a sign that there is fear. But from my point of view, this makes things even worse because the thinking mind can't solve anything. So it only puts off the fear that is constantly there and doesn't have a way of resolving it. For me, the only way of fundamentally resolving fears is to heal the child, all the trauma parts that hold fear as a basic essence of the trauma. And when they are healed, then the fear that is so much a basic sense of who the trauma parts are, that then that is a basic way of unlearning fear. Another, indecision and procrastination. When you procrastinate, there's a fear that you don't have what it takes to do what it is that you're procrastinating about. And when you're indecisive, you're hesitating making a decision because you're not sure of yourself. You fear you might make a mistake. Another is avoiding conflict or difficult conversation. Why would you do that? Well, difficult conversations or conflictual conversation puts your self-esteem on the line, or the part that believes I'm not good enough. I'm not good enough to speak my truth, hold my place. So conflict is avoided. Not to mention, conflict is an expression often of anger. And if you hold fear, you don't want to go through where someone is angry with you. A child strategy of people pleasing that we have dealt with before is also an aspect of fear. People pleasing came from the experience of being rejected, not approved of, abandoned, betrayed. So the inner child is bent on pleasing people, to have approval, not to be rejected, even basically seeking love. So the inner child's strategy is, let's make sure that people is as happy as I can make them so that I might get love, I might get approval. However, as I said in a previous video, people pleasing is about paying attention to everyone else's needs, not your own. And there you replay the original trauma. Your needs are not respected. And when you engage in this strategy, you are participating in that rejection of who you are. Another expression of fear is physical tension in the stomach or shoulders. When you're not coming from inspiration or confidence, you scrunch up, or you can feel the fear in your stomach. I have a client who often complains about how there is so much tension, there's almost pain in her gut. And she knows that it is trauma parts showing up with their fears. So, as an adult, if you're experiencing any of this, it's a sign that you're afraid. Just being in this world and all that we're exposed to, it's easy to accept that you are afraid. Another sign of fear is seeking constantly reassurance. Even getting to the habit of speaking and saying something, and you might say, does that make sense? Do you understand? Rather than having the confidence that you spoke as clearly as you could. And if the other person didn't understand, they would say something. But the insecurity drives you to say, am I making sense? Do you understand? And it can, seeking constant reassurance can be seen in other ways when you've done something, made a dinner, set a table, made reservations at a restaurant, and your guests are there. You might say, is this okay? Do you like this? Because you need reassurance. You're not coming from the place, I did the best I could, and We'll just deal with what happens. Another way of experiencing fear is planning ahead. In fact, the more details you plan, rather than say, whatever happens, we'll deal with it. The one who is in fear is planning every contingency, every detail. So there are no surprises, because surprises, unexpected things are scary. So that's another sign of fear. Another is playing it safe. Again, making sure that whatever you say, whatever you do, whatever you plan, you make it as safe as possible for yourself. Or when you respond to someone's question or request, to play it safe, you go along with it rather than say what your heart feels. Because that would be scary. If you said what your heart felt and it was rejected, you would feel rejected, and that would be so painful. And that's what the fear is. Then there's the fear of being judged, criticized, or abandoned. That's why it's often very difficult to speak publicly. You know, in class, when you had to go in front of the whole group and give a speech, or worse, in front of a school assembly and having to speak, in front of a large group in the workplace. When you present yourself with so much exposure, it would make sense that the fear of being judged or criticized would come up. Because when you say or present what you have to say, people will judge you and they'll probably criticize you. That is natural. That's what people do. But if you're afraid of it and sensitive about it, it's your fear speaking. Another is to stay invisible. You know, when you're invisible, you rarely attract attention. I know that. I've been an introvert my whole life. That was my nature. But along with that, I was content to be a wallflower. Is that what you call it? Being there, but not really being there, being so quiet, so shy. I was virtually invisible. That kept me safe. So these are the ways that the inner child could express fear in these subtle ways. Not to mention how fears just come up in general. And what are fears about? Not being safe, being in danger. And you've had the experience of being startled and your fight, flight, freeze system, physiological system, responding to a big event, a distressful, tragic, or chaotic event, just takes over and you run, you freeze, or you fight. The PTSD system kicks in. Now, that makes sense if there was actual danger, if a car or something was coming to collide with you. But so many of the fears that we're speaking about are influenced by past. It's the past informing the future or the present, or the expectation, because there was trauma, that is what's going to happen. So when you have fear, a lot of the time, it's an imagined, expected event that may not be realistic. It comes from the past. And that's why in my system, it's important to look at the fear, breathe, and see what it's about, see what the message is. So I hope this segment on fear in the inner child has been helpful for you. And please ask your questions in the comments. Thank you.